It began with a single announcement whispered through the corridors of Buckingham Palace. An announcement so unexpected that even senior aides reportedly froze in disbelief. When James, Earl of Wessex, was suddenly elevated ahead of Queen Camilla's own grandson, palace insiders claimed the reaction inside Clarence House was immediate, explosive, and impossible to contain. What looked like a ceremonial adjustment quickly became something far more dangerous, a royal power struggle threatening to fracture the fragile peace inside the House of Windsor. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Reports suggest the official confirmation arrived quietly, almost cautiously, as though senior palace figures already understood the storm it would unleash. There were no grand celebrations, no dramatic public statements, no triumphant unveiling meant to dominate headlines for weeks. Instead, according to royal commentators, the decision was delivered with unusual restraint, and that silence alone immediately triggered speculation throughout royal circles. Insiders whisper that several members of Camilla's inner household believed her grandson would eventually receive comparable royal recognition, as Charles continued reshaping the monarchy during the difficult years following his cancer diagnosis. That expectation, whether formally promised or quietly assumed, allegedly became deeply embedded within sections of Clarence House. So when James suddenly emerged with enhanced royal standing, many reportedly interpreted it not as a routine constitutional adjustment, but as a devastating institutional message about who truly belonged within the monarchy's protected future, and who did not. Courtiers allegedly described tense conversations unfolding behind closed doors within hours of the announcement, with one palace source claiming the atmosphere inside Clarence House became icy beyond repair. Different interpretations of those private exchanges suggest Camilla was not merely disappointed. She was reportedly blindsided. For years, observers had watched her carefully secure influence within the royal household, slowly building authority after the turbulent years that followed the death of Queen Elizabeth II. Yet now, according to insiders familiar with palace administrative streams, that carefully managed influence appeared suddenly vulnerable. What made the situation even more explosive was the reaction from other senior royals. Prince Edward and Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, reportedly remained unusually composed as speculation intensified around them, a calmness that some insiders interpreted as quiet confidence. Meanwhile, palace aides were allegedly instructed to avoid discussing the deeper succession implications publicly, fueling even more suspicion that this decision carried consequences far beyond ceremony. Then came another unsettling detail. Several media commentators began openly questioning whether Queen Elizabeth herself had quietly designed this hierarchy years earlier, long before the public even noticed tensions forming beneath the surface. Those whispers grew louder when reports emerged claiming that William, Prince of Wales, and Catherine, Princess of Wales, privately supported the move, allegedly viewing James as part of a stable future generation capable of protecting the monarchy from future instability. Inside palace circles, that interpretation changed everything. Because if William and Catherine truly backed this elevation, then the issue was no longer simply about one title. It was about the future balance of power after Charles. And suddenly, what appeared to be a ceremonial honor transformed into something much colder, far more strategic, and infinitely more personal for Camilla than anyone outside palace walls had first imagined. But the real shock was not the title itself, it was the chilling message hidden behind it. One that many inside the palace believe was aimed directly at Camilla's bloodline. Long before this royal title ignited outrage inside Clarence House, Queen Elizabeth II reportedly put quiet mechanisms into motion to preserve what she called the sacred continuity of the monarchy. And according to royal historians, James, Earl of Wessex, may have become the unexpected beneficiary of a plan decades in the making. For years, the late Queen was said to have watched the shifting dynamics inside the House of Windsor with a level of caution few people fully understood at the time. While public attention constantly focused on scandals, interviews, family feuds, and sensational headlines, insiders claim Elizabeth remained intensely focused on something much larger than temporary controversy. She was allegedly concerned with survival. Not survival for one reign, but survival for generations yet to come. And according to several royal commentators, that concern quietly shaped many of the decisions now unfolding behind palace walls. Reports suggest the late Queen developed enormous trust in Prince Edward and Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, precisely because they rarely demanded attention. Unlike other royal figures who often dominated headlines through conflict or emotional instability, Edward and Sophie reportedly embraced the slower, quieter burden of duty without public resentment. Palace insiders allegedly viewed them as dependable institutional figures who understood the monarchy was not meant to revolve around personal ambition. That reputation only deepened as Elizabeth entered the final years of her reign. Sources close to royal staff whisper that she increasingly regarded Edward's household as one of the last truly disciplined branches of the family. In many ways, historians now draw striking parallels between Edward's role and the lifelong service of Anne, Princess Royal. Both reportedly accepted difficult responsibilities without complaint. Both placed institutional stability above popularity. And both allegedly understood a truth many others struggled to accept. Inside the monarchy, survival often depends on restraint rather than visibility. That philosophy, according to insiders, shaped the upbringing of James himself. Despite carrying royal blood, James was reportedly raised with unusually strict discipline and limited exposure compared to other younger royals. There were no constant attempts to dominate headlines, no carefully crafted celebrity image, no aggressive positioning for public sympathy. Instead, commentators suggest he was quietly prepared for a future rooted in service rather than spectacle. And that distinction now appears critically important. Because as Queen Camilla's influence reportedly expanded after the coronation of 2023, whispers of concern allegedly began spreading through sections of the royal old guard. Different interpretations of palace discussions suggest some senior figures feared the monarchy risked becoming emotionally divided between traditional Windsor continuity and newer external family interests tied to the Parker Bowles branch. That fear, whether exaggerated or not, appears to have intensified during Charles's illness, as anxieties about succession and long-term hierarchy became impossible to ignore. Royal analysts now argue that titles within the monarchy are never merely ceremonial decorations. They are signals. They establish legitimacy, reinforce alliances, and quietly reveal which bloodlines are being positioned closest to the institution's future center of gravity. In that context, James's elevation suddenly carried enormous symbolic weight. To some insiders, it reportedly represented a powerful reaffirmation of the Windsor line itself over any broader expansion of influence surrounding Camilla's extended family. And according to palace commentators, that realization may have hit Clarence House harder than the announcement itself. Because once the emotional shock faded, what remained was something colder and infinitely more unsettling. The possibility that Queen Elizabeth's long game had quietly outmaneuvered Camilla before the battle had even fully begun. And once Camilla allegedly realized what the title truly symbolized, insiders claim her frustration transformed into something far more personal and far more explosive. Sources close to palace administrative circles claim the atmosphere inside Clarence House became radioactive within hours of the announcement. What began as disbelief reportedly erupted into one of the most emotional confrontations courtiers have witnessed since the turbulent years following the coronation of 2023. According to insiders familiar with palace operations, the emotional impact on Queen Camilla was immediate and deeply personal. For years, reports had circulated suggesting Camilla quietly hoped her side of the family would eventually gain stronger symbolic footing within the monarchy, as her role beside King Charles III became more established. But the sudden elevation of James, Earl of Wessex, reportedly shattered those expectations in one brutal moment. Palace commentators now suggest the decision struck at something far more sensitive than public prestige. It allegedly forced Camilla to confront the painful reality that despite becoming queen, her grandchildren still remained outside the protected inner structure of royal succession and institutional legitimacy. Insiders whisper that the emotional fallout intensified because many within Camilla's circle genuinely believed time was working in their favor. Charles's reign, his dependence on Camilla during years of public pressure, and her increasing visibility after the coronation reportedly created quiet confidence that her branch of influence was becoming untouchable. Yet according to various interpretations of palace conversations, the title granted to James suddenly exposed invisible boundaries that had apparently never moved at all. Reports suggest Camilla privately questioned why Edward's son had been prioritized so decisively, when her own family continued existing at the edges of royal recognition? That question, insiders claim, quickly evolved into frustration directed toward the wider institution itself. Because to some within Clarence House, this no longer looked like a ceremonial preference. It looked like exclusion. And that realization reportedly triggered increasingly tense private exchanges between Camilla and Charles behind closed doors. Sources close to palace staff allege the king found himself trapped between emotional loyalty to his wife and mounting pressure from traditional royal factions, determined to preserve what they viewed as the monarchy's historical bloodline structure. Courtiers allegedly described conversations becoming colder, sharper, and emotionally exhausting as Charles struggled to contain the growing divide. Different palace households reportedly began choosing sides quietly. On one side stood traditionalists who believed the monarchy could only survive through discipline, hierarchy, and carefully protected succession lines tied directly to the Windsor legacy. On the other stood figures more sympathetic to Camilla, many of whom allegedly believed her years of loyalty beside Charles deserved deeper institutional acceptance for her family as well. Those tensions had existed beneath the surface for years, but according to insiders, the James decision suddenly dragged them into the open. Long-standing concerns regarding the Parker Bowles family gaining broader influence reportedly returned with renewed intensity inside senior royal circles. Some palace veterans allegedly feared that expanding symbolic authority beyond the direct royal structure could weaken public understanding of who truly represented the crown. Others believed those fears unfairly isolated Camilla despite decades spent defending Charles during some of the monarchy's darkest modern years. But whatever the truth may have been behind closed doors, one thing reportedly became undeniable almost immediately: panic over information leaks. Palace staff were allegedly instructed to tighten internal communications, while aides worked aggressively to prevent details of private disputes from reaching the press. Ironically, those efforts appeared to fuel even greater speculation. Royal experts began analyzing every public appearance, every strained expression, every subtle shift in body language surrounding Camilla as rumors intensified across British media. And with each passing day, the atmosphere reportedly became more unstable, more suspicious, and infinitely more dangerous for a royal household already struggling under the immense pressure of Charles's fragile reign. But while Camilla's camp reportedly fought to understand what had happened, another royal faction had already begun quietly consolidating power behind the scenes. As tensions escalated behind palace walls, reports suggest William, Prince of Wales, and Anne, Princess Royal, responded with chilling precision rather than emotion. To royal insiders, this was never simply about one title. It was about protecting the monarchy from what they allegedly viewed as creeping instability inside the institution itself. While public attention remained locked on Queen Camilla's reported frustration, another battle was quietly unfolding beneath the surface, one driven not by outrage, but by strategy. According to palace commentators, Anne had grown increasingly concerned in recent years about preserving what she reportedly calls working royal legitimacy, the belief that only those fully committed to duty, discipline, and public service should remain close to the monarchy's future center of power. Insiders whisper that the Princess Royal viewed the growing tensions surrounding succession, influence, and extended family expectations as a dangerous distraction during one of the institution's most vulnerable periods. With King Charles III facing ongoing health struggles and public uncertainty surrounding the future of the crown, Anne reportedly believed there was no longer room for emotional ambiguity inside palace operations. That same philosophy, according to royal historians, appears to align closely with William's own increasingly calculated approach to the monarchy. Reports suggest the Prince of Wales has spent years quietly evaluating which members of the wider royal structure strengthen the institution, and which risk weakening public trust. Within that framework, palace insiders claim William allegedly views Prince Edward and his family as uniquely valuable. Unlike other royal households repeatedly pulled into controversy, Edward's branch reportedly remained disciplined, discreet, and remarkably free from scandal. To some within palace circles, James's elevation was therefore not simply a reward. It was a signal, a warning, a declaration about the kind of royal future William may ultimately intend to build once he becomes king. Different interpretations of recent palace movements suggest a quiet alliance may have gradually formed between Anne, William, and Edward, long before the current crisis exploded into public view. Several insiders have even described what they call an internal heirs accord, an unspoken understanding among senior royals determined to preserve institutional continuity above personal relationships. Whether such an agreement formally exists remains unclear, but commentators argue the pattern has become difficult to ignore. Again and again, the monarchy's most disciplined figures appear to be moving in quiet coordination, while emotional tensions erupt elsewhere around them. And as that perception grows stronger, palace observers claim Camilla's influence may now be entering a far more fragile phase than many previously imagined. For years, her authority expanded steadily beside Charles, particularly after the coronation transformed her from controversial royal spouse into queen. But insiders now whisper that the balance of power may be shifting away from Clarence House and back toward the direct Windsor succession line surrounding William and Catherine. That possibility reportedly places Charles in an agonizing position. Sources close to palace staff suggest the king remains emotionally loyal to Camilla and deeply appreciative of the support she provided during some of the darkest years of his public life. Yet at the same time, Charles allegedly understands the brutal institutional logic driving Anne and William's actions. Royal historians frequently note that titles within the monarchy are rarely about the present moment alone. They are strategic markers aimed at the future. They quietly reveal which bloodlines, values, and personalities are being positioned for long-term survival, once one reign ends and another begins. In that context, James's rise appears increasingly significant, and perhaps most striking of all has been the role of Catherine, Princess of Wales, throughout the growing turmoil. Publicly, Catherine reportedly maintains careful neutrality, refusing to inflame tensions or appear openly aligned against Camilla. Privately, however, insiders claim she strongly supports efforts to preserve stability around William's future reign, particularly as public trust in the monarchy faces mounting pressure. That quiet support, commentators argue, may be strengthening William's position more than many inside the palace fully realize. Because while emotional conflict continued consuming sections of Clarence House, the future leadership structure of the monarchy allegedly continued hardening behind closed doors with cold, relentless discipline. And just when the palace hoped the situation might cool down, a second revelation reportedly pushed Camilla's frustration to an entirely new level. According to several royal analysts, the elevation of James, Earl of Wessex, was never merely about honoring Prince Edward's son. The real significance, they claim, was the message it sent to every royal household inside Britain. Bloodline alone would no longer guarantee influence inside the modern monarchy. That realization reportedly sent a deep chill through palace circles, because it challenged one of the oldest assumptions surrounding royal privilege itself. For generations, proximity to the crown often created expectations of eventual status, recognition, and institutional protection. But insiders now whisper that the monarchy entering the post-Elizabeth era is operating under a far harsher philosophy, one where loyalty, restraint, and public trust matter more than emotional connections or extended family ties. And according to palace commentators, James's elevation became the clearest signal yet that the rules quietly governing the future of the House of Windsor may already be changing behind closed doors. Reports suggest senior royal strategists increasingly view discipline and stability as the monarchy's most valuable assets during a period of growing public skepticism. In that context, James reportedly represents something deeply important to the institution. Unlike younger figures repeatedly consumed by media controversy, emotional conflict, or celebrity-style exposure, James has largely remained outside the cycle of royal scandal. Analysts frequently point to his low-profile upbringing, his careful distance from public drama, and the disciplined environment allegedly created by Edward and Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, as evidence of a future royal model built around restraint rather than visibility. That contrast has become impossible for palace observers to ignore. While other royal branches spent years battling damaging headlines, fractured relationships, and public accusations, Edward's household reportedly maintained quiet consistency. And according to insiders familiar with institutional thinking inside Buckingham Palace, consistency may now matter more than charisma. Royal experts increasingly believe the monarchy is preparing for a leaner and more tightly controlled future structure once King Charles III's reign eventually comes to an end. That future, commentators argue, will likely reward only those viewed as strengthening public confidence in the crown. Within that framework, titles no longer function merely as honors. They become strategic investments in institutional survival. And for members of Queen Camilla's wider circle, that interpretation has reportedly become deeply unsettling. Insiders claim growing fears now exist within sections of Clarence House that Camilla's branch of influence could face permanent exclusion from the monarchy's long-term legacy planning. Those anxieties allegedly intensified because the symbolism surrounding James's rise appeared so deliberate. Royal historians frequently reference Queen Elizabeth II's long-standing philosophy of service before privilege, a belief that royal status had to be justified continuously through discipline and sacrifice rather than inherited entitlement alone. Many analysts now argue that philosophy still quietly shapes palace decision-making even after her death. In their view, James's elevation was not simply a reward for Edward's family. It was a reaffirmation of Elizabeth's vision for how the monarchy should survive in a far more hostile modern era. Yet that survival strategy reportedly places enormous pressure on Charles himself. Sources close to palace staff suggest the king remains increasingly trapped between competing forces pulling the institution in opposite directions. On one side stands his loyalty to Camilla and the personal life he fought decades to protect. On the other stands the brutal reality of preserving public trust in the monarchy during a time of declining patience for privilege and internal conflict. Every royal move now appears magnified under relentless public scrutiny. And according to commentators, the pressure surrounding succession planning has become impossible to contain quietly any longer. Across British media, a growing narrative has begun taking shape that the monarchy is slowly redefining itself for the next generation, stripping away emotional ambiguity in favor of a colder, more calculated structure centered around duty, discipline, and institutional legitimacy. And as those whispers spread deeper through palace corridors, one unsettling question reportedly began haunting senior royal households more than any title announcement ever could. But the deeper this struggle became, the more insiders began whispering that the battle was no longer about titles at all. It was about who would ultimately shape the monarchy after Charles. At the center of the storm stood King Charles III, physically weakened, emotionally exhausted, and reportedly trapped between two worlds rapidly pulling apart behind palace walls. One side demanded loyalty to family, the other demanded loyalty to the institution itself. According to palace insiders, the pressure surrounding the growing conflict over titles, succession symbolism, and future influence has taken a visible toll on the king during one of the most fragile periods of his reign. Reports suggest Charles has become increasingly isolated behind closed doors, weighed down not only by his ongoing health struggles, but also by the emotional burden of trying to preserve unity inside a monarchy drifting toward quiet internal fracture. Courtiers allegedly describe a man attempting to hold together competing loyalties that may no longer be capable of existing peacefully beside one another. On one side stands Queen Camilla, the woman Charles spent decades defending through scandal, criticism, and public hostility. On the other stands the brutal institutional machinery of the crown itself, now increasingly shaped by figures focused less on emotion and more on long-term survival. Insiders whisper that private disagreements between Charles and Camilla reportedly intensified after the elevation of James, Earl of Wessex triggered fears about shifting influence within the royal hierarchy. Different interpretations of those discussions suggest Camilla allegedly viewed the decision as part of a broader effort to quietly reduce her long-term role within future royal planning. Charles, however, reportedly remained deeply reluctant to inflame tensions further, while already battling immense public and personal pressures surrounding his health. According to sources familiar with palace operations, the king increasingly fears institutional conflict at a time when the monarchy can least afford visible instability. Yet that caution may have unintentionally accelerated another transformation already unfolding inside palace walls. Royal commentators claim William, Prince of Wales's authority within palace operations has continued growing steadily as Charles becomes more physically limited. What began as practical delegation during periods of illness has reportedly evolved into something far more consequential. Insiders now whisper that William's voice carries increasing weight across key institutional decisions, particularly those involving public trust, succession optics, and the monarchy's long-term structure. And standing quietly beside him throughout the turmoil, according to royal analysts, is Anne, Princess Royal. Palace staff allegedly describe Anne as one of the few senior royals capable of stabilizing tensions without escalating emotional chaos. Her reputation for discipline, restraint, and relentless duty reportedly gives her enormous influence during internal crises, particularly among older institutional figures still loyal to the late Queen Elizabeth II's philosophy of service before self-interest. For Camilla, however, that growing alignment between Anne and William has reportedly become deeply unsettling. Insiders claim one of her greatest fears now centers on the possibility of slowly losing long-term influence over royal decision-making as the monarchy prepares for the post-Charles era. That anxiety has only intensified as commentators increasingly frame the current tensions as part of a much larger struggle over who will ultimately shape the institution once William ascends the throne. Royal historians note striking parallels between the present atmosphere and earlier succession anxieties during the final years of Elizabeth's reign, when questions about continuity, legitimacy, and institutional trust quietly dominated palace calculations beneath the surface. But this time, the stakes reportedly feel even more personal, because the divisions now cut directly through the king's own household. Public appearances have therefore become subjects of relentless analysis. Every strained interaction, every subdued expression, every subtle shift in posture between senior royals reportedly fuels fresh speculation that tensions behind palace walls are becoming impossible to fully conceal. And according to insiders, the emotional exhaustion surrounding Charles has become increasingly difficult for even loyal palace aides to ignore. Because while the monarchy continues presenting unity to the world, many within royal circles allegedly understand a painful truth now hanging over the institution with growing intensity. The battle consuming the palace is no longer temporary. It is structural. It is generational. And it may ultimately define how Charles himself is remembered when this turbulent chapter of royal history finally comes to an end. And as the palace struggled to contain the fallout, one final realization reportedly began spreading through royal circles. A realization that changed everything. For decades, royal titles symbolized prestige, privilege, and hierarchy. But according to insiders, this moment revealed something far more unsettling inside Buckingham Palace. The monarchy was evolving into a colder, more strategic institution, where emotional loyalty mattered far less than institutional survival. What once appeared to the public as a family rooted in ceremony and tradition was now being described by palace commentators as something increasingly calculated, disciplined, and unforgiving beneath the surface. Reports suggest the elevation of James, Earl of Wessex, became symbolic of a much larger transformation quietly unfolding inside the House of Windsor. One shaped not by sentiment, but by fear of instability during a dangerous transitional era for the crown. Royal analysts now frequently speak about the emergence of what they call a streamlined monarchy, a future structure designed to reduce risk, eliminate unnecessary complications, and preserve public confidence through carefully controlled succession planning. According to insiders, the institution has spent years studying the damage caused by scandals, internal divisions, and media warfare surrounding various royal households. And within those discussions, James reportedly emerged as the kind of figure senior strategists increasingly value: disciplined, discreet, scandal-free, and institutionally reliable. His rise, commentators argue, was interpreted internally not as an emotional gesture toward Prince Edward's family, but as a reward for restraint itself. That symbolism reportedly carried devastating implications for other factions within the royal household, particularly those surrounding Queen Camilla. Because according to several palace observers, Camilla's frustrations exposed divisions that had existed quietly beneath the surface for years. The conflict was never simply about personal disappointment. It reflected a growing clash between two competing visions of monarchy, one rooted in institutional discipline and another shaped by emotional loyalty, blended family dynamics, and evolving modern realities. Insiders whisper that as these tensions intensified, younger royals increasingly began facing an entirely different kind of evaluation inside palace circles. Public image, discretion, emotional stability, and institutional value reportedly became more important than ever before. Royal historians note that in earlier generations, birth alone often guaranteed long-term inclusion within the monarchy's symbolic core. But under the pressure of modern scrutiny, that model allegedly began collapsing. Now every royal figure appears measured against a brutal question. Do they strengthen the crown, or do they place additional strain upon it? According to palace aides familiar with internal discussions, preserving stability before William, Prince of Wales eventually ascends the throne has quietly become one of the institution's highest priorities. That urgency reportedly intensified during King Charles III's ongoing health battles, forcing senior figures to think far more aggressively about continuity than the public fully realizes. And within that environment, the monarchy's so-called old guard allegedly began reasserting influence over succession optics, public trust, and long-term royal positioning. Figures aligned with the philosophies of the late Queen Elizabeth II reportedly fear that emotional instability or public controversy could permanently weaken the institution during the next transition of power. As media narratives surrounding James's elevation spread across Britain, commentators increasingly framed the decision as symbolic of a broader royal reset already taking shape behind palace walls. What looked like one isolated title announcement suddenly appeared, connected to something much larger. A systematic effort to redefine the monarchy for a harsher modern age. And perhaps most ominously of all, growing whispers inside royal circles now suggest Charles's reign itself may ultimately be remembered less as a defining era, and more as a fragile bridge between two vastly different versions of the crown. One built on emotional reconciliation and personal loyalty, the other built on discipline, containment, and survival at any cost. And in the silence that followed the chaos, the palace appeared to send one unmistakable message about the future of the crown. In the end, insiders say this was never truly about James, Earl of Wessex, Queen Camilla, or even one royal title. It was about the monarchy choosing what kind of future it wanted to survive for, and who it trusted to carry that future forward when the current era finally comes to an end. According to palace commentators, the emotional storm surrounding James's elevation gradually revealed something much larger than a family disagreement hidden behind palace walls. What unfolded inside the House of Windsor was allegedly a defining institutional decision about continuity, legitimacy, and survival during one of the most uncertain chapters the modern monarchy has faced in decades. Reports suggest senior royal figures increasingly viewed James not simply as Edward's son, but as a symbol of stability in a period consumed by tension, scandal, public exhaustion, and growing fear over the future of the crown itself. His quiet rise reportedly represented the exact qualities palace strategists now believe the monarchy desperately needs in order to endure the next generation: restraint, discipline, reliability, and silence. And perhaps that is what made the situation so emotionally devastating for Camilla. Because while she remained queen beside King Charles III, insiders whisper that the deeper institutional power surrounding the monarchy appeared to be shifting steadily away from her orbit. According to royal analysts, Camilla allegedly found herself increasingly isolated within the very system she spent decades fighting to enter. The emotional contrast became impossible to ignore. Publicly, she still stood beside the king during major royal events, maintaining the image of unity expected from the crown. But privately, commentators suggest many of the monarchy's most influential figures were already preparing for a future structure centered elsewhere. Within palace circles, that future reportedly revolves around what insiders have begun describing as the monarchy's trusted core. At the center of that group stand William, Prince of Wales, and Catherine, Princess of Wales, supported closely by Anne, Princess Royal, Prince Edward, and Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh. Different interpretations of palace dynamics suggest these figures increasingly represent the monarchy's preferred image for the future: disciplined, discreet, duty-focused, and institutionally dependable. And according to royal historians, that alignment may ultimately become one of the defining legacies of Charles's reign. Sources close to palace staff claim the king himself was forced into painful compromises throughout the crisis, attempting to preserve emotional peace inside his family while also protecting the crown from deeper instability. In many ways, Charles reportedly became the tragic figure standing between two eras of monarchy. One rooted in personal reconciliation, emotional complexity, and modernized family relationships. The other shaped by colder calculations about survival, legitimacy, and public trust. Historians now describe the James decision as a quiet but historic shift in palace priorities, because it exposed how dramatically the monarchy's internal thinking may already have changed. Public fascination only intensified as commentators across Britain debated what the controversy truly revealed about the future of the royal family. To some observers, the entire episode symbolized a monarchy attempting to adapt to a harsher modern age where public patience for scandal and emotional chaos has grown dangerously thin. To others, it represented something more painful: the realization that within royal life, personal sacrifice often matters less than institutional necessity. Yet despite the tension, the heartbreak, and the silent rivalries reportedly spreading through palace corridors, one principle appeared to emerge stronger than ever from the chaos. The monarchy, according to insiders, now seems determined to prioritize duty over personal ambition, restraint over emotional influence, and legitimacy over sentiment. And perhaps that is the cruelest truth hidden beneath the glittering spectacle of royalty itself. Behind every title lies sacrifice. Behind every ceremony lies isolation. And behind every carefully guarded palace door stands an institution forever fighting to preserve itself against the very human emotions threatening to tear it apart from within. Because within the ancient walls of Buckingham Palace, titles may glitter in public, but behind closed doors, it is loyalty, silence, and duty that ultimately decide who truly belongs to the crown. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.